We have reached the specialist subject round, Jason. I'm going to ask you 18 general knowledge questions generated by an honest and truthful AI on the 9/11 attacks, which is seriously a specialist subject of yours for many years, something you dedicated your life to an extent. You may sense outrageous AI skullduggery, rich with establishment narrative, and you can earn extra points by setting the story straight. You know how to do it. Just say truth bomb along the way. Are you ready, my friend?
I am. Let's do it.
Jason, your 18 questions on the attacks on September the 11th. Some of these will be hard. Some of these will be easy. Most of these will probably be water off a duck's back to you. Here we go. What time did the North Tower collapse on 9/11? Well, I know. I knew that one was going to... I just sent Jason Bamas back into his chair. Whew, that's power.
9:46?
Oh, 10:28 a.m. I'm afraid. You can earn back a point by throwing in a truth bomb for it.
Boy, man, when we want to talk about the collapse of the towers, I would just tell people that when you look at not only the fact that these were not the first two skyscrapers to be hit by sizable planes. You had a B-52 hit the Empire State Building, but you also had numerous reports of other explosions, secondary explosions, one before the plane hit the tower in the basement level of the World Trade Center. And I would also say the forensic evidence, aka the videos of the police department coming into the ground floor, which had another 10 stories below it into the subway system and beyond. You had not only marble panels blown off the walls, but what is essentially bulletproof and really shockproof in many cases, glass that was this thick in those halls, totally and completely destroyed, with no burn marks, by the way. Mm-hmm. So it's certainly that the official explanation, whether this is asked by AI or not, is that somehow, some way, that initial explosion that came down came through all of the elevator shafts, 90 plus in some cases stories, and then blew out there. But what they don't tell you is that the building was hermetically sealed, and that would have really been an impossibility, as the elevator shafts were actually staggered every, I believe, 30 or so floors, so that you would have to get off and then get on and then get off if you were in those upper areas.
You are going to have so many truth bombs on this round, obviously. So I expect to see at least I expect to see basically a full run of truth bombs. That's for sure. You get a point there, of course. What building collapsed without being hit by a plane?
Well, obviously, World Trade Center 7 is going to be the one that many people saw and collapsed.
Well, it's what AI is asking. So, but they are saying, 7 World Trade Center.
Yeah, 7 would be the one. But let me say this. Although it was not completely demolished, Building 6 had a large scoop out of the building from the very top that you can see in the satellite photographs. And you had multiple areas within the World Trade Center facility that also had 2,000 plus degree temperatures that were not only caught on the record by the NASA thermal imagery, but discussed by George Pataki, who was the governor of New York at the time, discussed by Giuliani multiple times publicly. But with Building 6 in particular, Ken Holden of FEMA went on the record and said that there was molten metal dripping within Building 6, also not part of the official narrative, although it was an official of FEMA that brought that to light. Bonus truth bomb. James Bukarski, who was heading up, I believe, those Office of Emergency Management drills for FEMA, actually discussed the week of 9/11 that under the towers themselves, there was an incendiary effect. And basically, you had 2,700 degree temperatures where it was basically a crematorium and created a cremation effect. So he was unsure of how many of the dead would actually be able to be identified.
Incredible. Okay, right. I normally don't I either give it a truth bomb, I give a point, I give a bonus point, I give a corruption point, or whatever, or laughter point. But I'm going to give you a point, I'm going to give you a bonus point, and I'm going to give you a truth bomb point because I think what you're doing is, and what you've done for years is special, and you're able to expand out this story like no one else. I was really looking forward to this. It's not disappointing at all. Let's go on to the next one. What terrorist group was responsible for the 9/11 attacks? This is according to AI.
AI is going to see Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, again, there's a reason I made fabled enemies. So, especially when we talked earlier about the ISI and their funding, at least of Muhammad Atta and others, to talk about another group, the Mossad. You not only had this group that seemed to be filming the event that day. In fact, you cannot see the photographs that they took, but you can see scans of those photographs on like a black and white, you used to throw your ass on it right there. Those things, a copy machine, basically. So they had pictures, folks, of these people. They kept them from the public. And then they had copy machine photos they released eventually due to FOIAs. But the best part is they put squares over their faces so you couldn't see their reactions. One of the photos actually shows somebody holding up a lighter to where the World Trade Center was on fire. Now, you had somebody in the area seeing that they were doing this, taking the pictures and possibly filming. It hasn't been clear, and the FOIA did not provide any footage, but calls the police. They're arrested. There's another group arrested that day where they're pulled over, they're in a van, and essentially a dog smells explosive material, so they're detained. A lot of people think those are the only two groups that day. There's a third group that is in a van, and there is an explosion of their van on King Street. Police audio of that is in my film, Fabled Enemies. However, that is just the network that was caught that day. A lot of people don't know. Within that network, you already had people being arrested from around the country. Many people have heard about the Israeli art students, but in that network, which was a widespread network through the country once again, you also had individuals that had opened up kiosks in malls. So before we had the little drone-like things, in the States, we had these little toys that were helicopters. And there'd be a little zip line. And you pull the zip line, and it would fly up and come down there. Now, the other thing about these individuals is that they were related to not only urban moving systems, which was in that World Trade Center complex, but companies called Amdocs and Converse that were responsible for a lot of the telecommunications in the United States. And in that piece, showing all of these people that were arrested before 9/11, were part of the group on 9/11, and that were arrested after 9/11, they had compromised essentially every single government buildings, and some in secret. So how would they have done that? Not only in person, but like I said, Amdocs and Converse back in the day, like we talked about Promise and Carnivore and those things, Johnny, they were responsible simply for the billing systems. So we all didn't have free minutes back when these things didn't exist. You actually got charged for a thing called long distance. So they would time you out. So they would know how long one phone number would call another phone number. And from that, they would get the addresses of those phone numbers, and they would work things out. So it was a large intelligence network.
There was a large intelligence network. I know. I mean, we got to go on, but I can't remember how many people. If you can remember, you've already got a point for getting the correct answer, a point for the truth bomb, but you could have an extra point if you can tell me how many Israelis got deported afterwards.
I believe the mainstream numbers, although it didn't give a specific number, were in the 150 person range. So that is, I will say this, both Colin Powell, who we discussed earlier, and Ari Fleischer, who was the press secretary on the time, got asked in the press room about the detention of these Israelis. And both had to admit it, but they punted it to the Department of Justice.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll accept the bonus point there. That's all very good. All very good. Right. Okay, now we'll keep going. What flight crashed into the Pentagon on 9/11?
175. Flight 175.
Well, they say
Wait, no, it's not 175. It's flight 11. No, it's not flight 11. It's flight. Hold on.
I love this.
It's flight
I haven't
11.
accepted your answer yet. Wait, I haven't accepted your answer. You've now
No,
given me.
awful.
You're going. No. Go on. Which one is it?
Flight 11 is First World Trade Center. Second is 175. 93 is in Pennsylvania. And why is the fourth plane's number is now eluding me? Well, 11.
You want me to say no?
175. Hold on. It's killing me that I don't have it because I want to think. I want to say it's an American Airlines flight. And
well, Jason's thinking. I'll just.
You know what? Why can't I think about the fourth plane? 175, 11, 93.
Do you know what airline it was?
Like I said, I believe it was the American Airlines plane. It wasn't a United.
So if you say American Airlines.
Yeah, man. It's killing me. 77. Is it flight 77?
Look at that. Listen, I have to say, I'm not going to give you the point there.
No, you can't give me the point on that. I'm embarrassed that I didn't have all four.
That was fun. It was fun to watch a man have to try and get to the end of his tether to find out what the end of, and you did it. You did it. I knew that if you had just said American Airlines, then it would kind of come back and you remember everything. That's how memory works. Do you have any truth bombs on there to garner an extra point?
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, first of all, it seems like obviously the four planes that they gave us were United and American Airlines flights. But currently, there's a documentary on a plane called United 23. And maybe that was clouding my mind because I kept saying wanted to say United and 20, and I knew it wasn't either. United 23 is in my film Fabled Enemies. And at the time, we knew that there were individuals that were described as Muslim in appearance, and supposedly, every indication from the staff was that they were going to hijack the plane that day. Unfortunately for them, it was unable to take off on time, and all planes were grounded. Now, the really interesting thing that was reported back then was that they got off the plane, they left their luggage, and they were never found. And their luggage matched Atta's luggage in the sense that Atta's luggage didn't make a connecting flight, and they found it. And this is where they came up with the flight manuals and the Quran and the Rada from Islam. Now, remember,
convenient.
Exactly. Now, here's the kicker. They said that they couldn't find these people because they used false identification. Well, if they used false identification, why wouldn't the other hijackers use false identification? On top of that, finding out more of what actually happened, TMZ has now put out their documentary on this for free. I would encourage people to watch it. And it shows you what they meant by Muslim in appearance. They claimed that one of the people they thought was going to hijack the plane was a man dressed in a burqa. They also talked about the fact they had a small child on the plane with them that they tried to get into the cockpit early on. They also mentioned how the plane is extremely empty, much like the other planes that day. I think the average has them at around or under 50% altogether.
Wow.
And on top of that, they actually had a fake lineup, Johnny. The FBI had them all later that day where they brought in other Muslims, and none of them were the people on that plane. There's even more to get into from that documentary.
Wow.
It seems like you had two individuals that had access to the plane after everybody was disboarded. You had eyewitnesses seeing them on the plane, and then the FBI specifically asked everybody why the hatches that went below into the electronics room were opened. Now, the real question is, were these people that went on the plane after the fact through the hatch underneath on the runway to go get weapons off the plane, because weapons were actually found on numerous other planes, including one next to Flight 23 that day? Or were they in that area the entire time with access to the electronics, where even if the hijacking had failed, they could have commandeered the plane and done whatever they want to it?
That's amazing. There's so much to be had there. That's a good extra point there to be earned, even though you didn't earn the question point. But okay, let's keep going. You have so many answers Well, you have answers that some of them are questions, but they're the next question that you ask when you find the next answer, and that's the way this stuff works, isn't it? Where was the Pennsylvania field, which was the site of a 9/11 crash?
So Shanksville, Pennsylvania, is the
Correct.
official location for the crash there. But I would always add to that one of the big things about 9/11 and that quote-unquote crash site is that you did not have large pieces of debris anywhere. It was strewn out over an 8-mile radius, although the media will lie to you about that, and they will say, well, we found some stuff at Indian Lake. And, if you are driving there, back in the day, it was Google Maps. Not everybody had GPS. It'll give you like an 8-mile distance. It's really only 1.5 miles away. Truth bomb. They also found debris from that plane over a mountain ridge 8 miles away in a place called New Baltimore. Okay. And another truth bomb that I'd like to put out there, which is almost completely unbelievable, but one of the things that was perpetrated not only by the mainstream media, but really put out there in the Paul Greengrass film, United 93, on the Let's Roll Todd Beamer story, is that the hijackers were wearing red bandanas. In the trials of Zacharias Moussaoui, the supposed 20th hijacker, who, while he was tried, had to wear a stun belt in court, look it up, they presented, and anyone can go see this, red bandanas that were recovered from the crash site that are still folded as if they were around somebody's head, completely unbloody and burnt, with no head attached to them whatsoever, as evidence that they did this.
Wow, that's pretty. That's okay. Get the point, and you get the truth bomb as well. That is completely bizarre. But there's so many points where you feel like that in this story. Okay, what agency, and you know this one, of course, what agency studied the World Trade Center collapse?
You are talking about the National Institute of Standards and Technology, also known as NIST. Truth bomb, although they are the initial organization to look at 1 and 2, as there was much more of a demand right away, because initially the theory out there that was put out there was a gradual collapse, a pancake collapse was what they had put out there initially. And then they reversed that in many senses because they knew that jet fuel only burned so hot, and they could not acknowledge things like the molten steel and the temperatures that I did. So with 1 and 2, they only describe how the steel is weakened to a point, collapse initiates, and then they call it global collapse. So everything from the initial collapse is not described in their scientific papers, which ignored a ton of evidence that Kevin Ryan and others have put out there from underwriters' laboratories that did many of the experiments. Now, multi-truth bomb, NIST would have to come in many years later. I think it was 7 years later they put their report out on Building 7. I think it was right around 7 years. So NIST came out and also did the official version of what happened at Building 7, where initially, again, they had talked about a collapse due to explosions in the boiler room. Okay, so they had, supposedly these large-scale explosions. Barry Jennings, a survivor from Building 7, actually commented on that and said it was total trash. Well, again, they would come back and they would revise that initial finding, and they would say
just a little bit, just a wafer thin tweak.
Yes, they would say that the damage from towers 1 and 2 caused, I believe, up to a third of the base of the building of World Trade Center to be, quote unquote, scooped out. And it is from that scoop out and damage that this building collapsed in on itself, a 47-story skyscraper that was also the spook house of New York City.
Unbelievable. NIST, you're quite right. I think it was Arthur C. Bement got put in charge of them. Everything they did, everything they needed to do. They were the guys who could do everything, get away with it because no one was going to ask them any questions. It's a lot like the Royal Society was how that was used during COVID over here. Okay, just to say, next one. What 2001 law was passed after 9/11?
I mean, if you're talking about the Patriot Act, that would be the huge one. But as I stated, there were numerous ones that came in rapid succession, although that was the quickest one with almost no debate and clearly the vast majority of Congress and Senate not reading the bill whatsoever.
You're an expert at the top of your game on this stuff. So give me something special about the Patriot Act, something to go away with. And the people.
Section 802 of the Patriot Act is extremely broad in the regard that it basically says, and this is the first time that you're putting U.S. citizens outside of constitutional law, but basically describes any entity that is able to cause social change or attempt to cause that social change through coercion. I mean, I'd have to read it again, but Section 802 of the Patriot Act essentially could encompass any American citizen of any level of descent. And this was the precursor to not only things like the National Defense Authorization Act, but also departments like Homeland Security that did not exist prior to 9/11.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. That's good. You get a good truth bomb there. Fantastic. Next question. What agency was created post 9/11 for security?
Well, that would be the Department of Homeland Security, or as I like to call it, the Department of Security. Now,
you go on. The Department of what? Sorry, I was saying mum over the top of that, so I missed it. What did you say?
The Department of Deutschland Security.
Oh, okay.
So, for those that don't know, truth bomb, the Homeland was very, very, very invoked after the Reichstag fire on Hitler's ascent to power. Many people have speculated that indeed was a false flag and given evidence and rightfully compared it to 9/11. On top of that, when we talk about Homeland Security, a guy named Michael Chertoff would become the head of Homeland Security. And
you don't want to trust Michael Chertoff. He's a neocon.
Michael Chertoff, prior to that, was a deputy director of the FBI, who had actually been around, obviously, there for a long time. A lot of people forget that Robert Mueller cut his teeth on 9/11, at least as the director. Again, he had been there a long time, but was installed in short order, I think within 2 weeks prior to 9/11. And Chertoff, specifically, was contacted.
Most evil-looking man in the world. There is no one who looks more evil than Michael Chertoff.
Doesn't look great. Okay, Michael Chertoff heavily invested in the movement that would become successful to get body scanners in all of airports, so beyond the TSA. And Chertoff would actually attack and dissuade FBI whistleblowers, including Robert Wright, Barry Carmody, and others, when they were going to come and discuss a thing called Operation Vulgar Betrayal, where they had the bin Laden network's money moving through a guy named Yassin Qadi. And Chertoff specifically said, we don't want to hear about conspiracy theories. That is a quote. You can go watch that in my film, Fabled Enemies. Robert Wright and the others were basically taken off of their FBI duties and then made into pencil pushers.
What wasn't Chertoff later Alliance for Securing Democracy out of the German Marshall Fund?
I believe so. Oh, that guy was so privatized post Homeland Security. You could not. Again, he had his fingers in so many pies. And a truth bomb. When 9/11 truth started to take off in a manner where the mainstream media had to address it, an individual named Benjamin Chertoff was the one that was heading up, along with James Meggs and David Dunbar, a Popular Mechanics smear piece. Now, early on, it was asked whether or not they were related. Benjamin Chertoff's mother is quoted as saying that Benjamin Chertoff and them were, of course, they know each other, they're cousins. Benjamin Chertoff would also be used in the Debunking Jason Burmis History Channel special on 9/11 that aired on the 5th anniversary of 9/11, where you can see myself, Dylan, Corey, and people like Benjamin Chertoff and James Meggs.
Incredible. And that's a great extra point. I just want to add in as well something that links you and I. You were one of the first, and every single one of those videos got removed from YouTube. I can't really mention her name on here. The big J word, you know who I'm talking about, the Yunker. I mean, she has been constantly having my work taken down for 6 years. Well, when I had written the first article and it showed her investing in Carbine 911 with Ehud Barak, Jeffrey Epstein, etc., when that article came out, it messed up their plans. They had to change their entire board, and they brought on Michael Chertoff. So there you go. The guy who gets brought on to handle the big cases. And I actually got him a job in that sense to an extent, didn't I? So that's good. You helped me with that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We both helped Michael Chertoff get a job. Okay, right. Next one. Here we go. What commission investigated the 9/11 attacks?
Well, that would be the 9/11 Commission. Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton would be the heads of that commission. Robert Zelikow would kind of be the overseer of that commission in the sense that Zelikow was oversight. Those were the two heads of the commission. And then a lot of people, TRUTHBOMB, there was actually a commission inside the commission that got to see documents that nobody else were allowed to see within the commission. And Max Cleland not only resigned in anger from the commission because of this and said on Wolf Blitzer, Blitzer goes, well, if you're among the commission members that gets to see these documents, would you stick into it? He goes, no, it's a scam. They're a scam on the American people. Cleland, to his credit, was a war veteran and didn't like any of it. So he resigned from that commission. And not only when they put out their paperwork, I would say that, number one, they left Building 7 out of it totally and completely, but they also left everything out about United 23 and many other things. In that documentary on TMZ, they have, Bob Carey. He was another member of the commission to kind of answer for why they didn't discuss United 23. And he said it was for a lack of resources. I just want to say this, even for the time period, they intentionally, so they could fall back on this excuse, underfunded that commission. So that could be part of why they didn't get to the bottom of it. And once again, in that documentary, they have their expert that looked at everything 9/11, and her excuse for them not talking about 23 was every time that they found something that didn't make sense or they couldn't figure out, they just moved on. Yeah. I mean, is that an investigation? No, sir. That is in fact, it was so much of a whitewash and a cover-up, TRUTHBOMB, that the New Yorker magazine, that was as establishment as it gets, literally had a cover story on the 9/11 whitewash where they had I believe it was a can of paint for the white, dipping people into it like little characters, plastic things. I think it might have been a drawing, so it could have been little people. And that on the cover. You pull that cover up, it shows you what a joke the 9/11 Commission was.
Earl Warren would have a smile on his face down there. He would indeed.
TRUTHBOMB. Lee Hamilton, who helped start that. Just because you said that about the Warren Commission, Lee Hamilton was a part of the Warren Commission in his early days. Also, a part of the Iran-Contra Commission.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, that'll wrap up in the bonus point too. Oh my Lord, that was the 1992 or 1991 one. I think 91. That was the one that I come up in the Pottinger supremacy, that Pottinger was also heavily involved in, because him and Cyrus Hashemi were the very start of working out what to do with Iran-Contra. Of course, Epstein's victim's lawyer, now dead. Okay, right. Let's keep going. That's an excellent point. Astounding to watch you go. I'm really enjoying this. What flight crashed in Pennsylvania on 9/11?
So that would be United 93.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And all right, so more truth bombs on there.
Go on.
I mean, we discussed the wide debris field. We also discussed some of the evidence that was left around. At the time, the coroner, who then recanted, initially said that when he got there, he had expected to, find dead bodies, but there were no dead bodies there at the time. Another truth bomb about United 93, some of the phone calls were supposedly cell phone calls that have been highly contested. In the film Loose Change, we discussed real-time voice morphing technology that the Pentagon then had openly. And Johnny, today, I could hit a little button right here, and I could be talking to you as though I were the Musker
himself, like this. I mean, it's not perfect, and it's not that great, but it is now commercially available. So those that think
that there is no possibility that that was in use on 9/11 really don't know.
Wow, it's almost like he's in me butt. Okay, excellent. Right. How many planes were hijacked on 9/11?
Oh, okay. So this is the AI answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of them.
Yeah. The AI answer is going to say 4.
Yeah, 4 hijacked planes.
So now let me give the real answer there. So on top of that, we've discussed truth bomb. We've already discussed United 23 and the fact that they found weapons on a multitude of planes that day, outside of even United 23 and the flight next to him. Time magazine reported on that again shortly after the attacks. However, when we're talking about phantoms or other hijackings that were on the radar, it appears to be 20 plus. So once again, you can actually go to the 9/11 Commission hearings, and this was included in, I believe, both Loose Change Final Cut and A Fabled Enemies. But Richard Myers, who was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, had to confirm, quote unquote, we fought many phantoms that day. So once again, they were following hijackings that were on the radar, but not necessarily hijacked or real aircraft at all.
That is a very interesting, good truth bomb there. Excellent. That is a very interesting one. What was the mayor of New York? This is how AI has phrased it. Yeah. What was the mayor of New York during 9/11? They're not classing him as a human.
So what was he?
What was it? What type of horrible creature?
Former prosecutor that had also hosted Saturday Night Live
in New York, boy. Yeah.
Of New York City, also dressed in drag on Saturday Night Live. I would also say that Rudy Giuliani has surprised me in the sense that he has now commented on Building 7 directly. And one of the things that people do not know about Rudy Giuliani is that his right-hand man was a guy named Michael Hess. He was the city corporation counsel on 9/11. And he was actually blown up in Building 7, going to the 23rd floor with Barry Jennings. He went on television that day. When they got down to the 8th floor, there was an explosion. Now, that's not just Barry Jennings talking to Jason Burmis and Dylan Avery. Michael Hess literally said that on the day of the attacks, and then both of them were rescued by the fire department. Rudy Giuliani acknowledged that Michael Hess was also in the building and that had indeed occurred. Off air, Rudy Giuliani, who also knew that there were all sorts of Central Intelligence Agency documents in Building 7, essentially said to me that he did not believe it was a controlled demolition because of those documents. But then he said if they were trying to destroy things and cover things up, then maybe the possibility was there. What we both agreed on was the fact that you had CIA snipers on the roofs surrounding Ground Zero from all the documentation that had been blown up and now was strewn out publicly, and they had to retrieve that documentation.
Holy hell in a handbag. Now, I can tell you, I've talked to Rudy Giuliani as well. And it was just after, it was a month after, less than a month after I'd released a series of documentaries about the Pottinger stuff. And Rudy Giuliani, when he was in New York, he was actually back in the 80s when they were looking at prosecuting people. They looked at whether to prosecute Stanley Pottinger for his involvement in Iran-Contra, his central involvement in Iran-Contra, and they decided eventually he went off to Mexico, disappeared, it all died down, and afterwards, you know, you had these sort of like commissions, that the October Surprise Commission and stuff, and then everything got laid to rest and everybody got off with it. But Rudy Giuliani, when I spoke to him, I actually asked him straight. It was on an X space, a Mario Narthwell one of the Epstein X spaces, and I asked him why they let Pottinger off, and he said he couldn't remember. But I don't believe him at all. I don't believe him. he remembers what he wants to remember.
Well, you know, truth bomb. The police commissioner Bernard Carrick at the time ended up being a pretty corrupt individual that actually served prison time, but after the fact, just as connected to, I would say, the conservative establishment as you possibly could be, and got kind of cushy gigs within think tanks that were the tune of six figures and more.
Yep. Okay, excellent. You get a truth bomb for what you said about Rudy Giuliani. You got it right. What organization monitored air defense on 9/11?
That's the NRO. That is the National Reconnaissance Office. And NORAD. National Reconnaissance Office and NORAD. Let me say something, truth bomb, about the National Reconnaissance Office. The National Reconnaissance Office was not acknowledged to be a thing, okay, for 20 plus years of its existence. And when I talk about the NRO and the NORAD tapes, for instance, we, as independent journalists, the Loose Change Crew, were the first to get those tapes outside of Vanity Fair, where they were saying they had done a piece. Basically, Vanity Fair did a piece trying to debunk the war games and essentially saying the tapes proved nothing and the war games were over. And then we were actually in there as the first internet blockbuster, but portrayed as conspiracy theorists. I think within 3 months of that, we got those things and then started airing the communications. And those communications, again, in slight, appear in Fabled Enemies.
Excellent. That's brilliant. You get the extra point. Amazing. What airlines operated the planes that hit the Twin Towers?
Oh, well, again, American and United were the two airlines that suffered the hijackings that we saw on 9/11, but there is speculation we had others.
I'm going to go on to the next one. What famous call to action was said on Flight 93?
There it is. Todd Beamer. Hello, Mom. This is your son, Todd Beamer. Let's roll. And let's roll. And let's roll was that mantra utilized not only by the Bush administration, but as I just said, they made a Hollywood movie. It was the first Hollywood movie on the spectrum of 9/11. Later on, Oliver Stone would do World Trade Center. Neither, of course, would delve into the quote-unquote conspiracy theory or questioning angle. And once again, I never watched either, only little clips. But let's roll. Todd Beamer, United 93. Paul Greengrass is the guy behind the Bourne Identity series. So, for those that don't know about the Bourne Identity series, I'm not telling you that there isn't a lot of fiction in there. But I would actually encourage people to watch that, because that really lets the cat out of the bag on how a lot of these black operations work and how heartless and soulless some of these assassinations and killings can actually go down.
And before you The Bourne Identity, Supremacy, and Ultimatum, you should read, go over to Newspace, you should read the Pottinger Identity, the Pottinger Supremacy, and the Pottinger Ultimatum first. And then you'll see the similarities in the real world CIA to what was that going on over there too. Lots and lots of stuff. Anyway, okay, next one. We got 3 questions left. This has been a fantastic round. This, I have to say, this is a brilliant way to bring people a massive amount of knowledge and to show people the direct conflict of the narrative. And there is no better person, I think I know, than you to do this about this very subject. So I've been looking for, since I conceived of Truth Bomb, this round that we come to the end of now, and you being the person I'm talking to, was something that I conceived of maybe 6-7 months ago, and I thought, this is the type of thing that I want, and I want to be able to ask you the question. So I'm very happy that you've joined me, Jason. I'm very happy you're here. I think this is a really good thing, and what you're doing is amazing all throughout your career, all throughout. Just want to say that. Where was President Bush during the 9/11 attacks?
He was down in Florida, obviously at that school, Truth Bomb. There is some evidence to suggest that there may have been a hit team in Florida to possibly assassinate Bush Jr. that day, and they were arrested. They were posing as a film crew. A lot of people are very well aware of the My Pet Goat story that he was reading. There are some coinky-dinks with, I believe it's plain, hit, steal, that they are reciting with the children there. They're reading the words on there, which is unnerving. But Andy Card, his chief of staff, is the one that whispers into his ear that we are under attack. I'll say this. There is a documentary out there. I think it is a History Channel documentary. I want to say it's over a decade old. I've often said that George Bush Jr. was running nothing that day and not in on any plot. At one point during 9/11, the quote-unquote hijackers or team, it's not really specified how, but these people have the codes for the Secret Service that day. And one of them says, Angel is next. Angel was the code word for Air Force One. So as they were leaving on Air Force One, they were worried about sniper teams on the runway. They were worried about being knocked out of the sky. There was unease that they may have had even somebody on the inside within the plane. And then essentially Bush would go underground. Truth bomb. You know who was in the White House? Because George Bush wasn't on the morning of 9/11? His father, Daddy Bush, just happened to be in the White House that morning. And then I believe would leave for New York for a separate meeting, and I don't want to get the company he was meeting for, but again, in the White House on the morning of 9/11.
Unbelievable. Excellent. Okay, 2 questions left. What group published the 9/11 Truth Movement's theories? Very interesting.
What
AI
group?
says this.
So I would imagine what he's talking about are the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, as they are like the only, I would say, official group that looks at the scientific analysis of the structures of 1, 2, and 7.
But they've been going hard for a long time as well.
Absolutely. God bless Richard Gage, who's no longer with the organization, but was a driving force for that organization for years. And quite frankly, the way that he was kind of tossed out for calling out the COVID-19 84 nightmare as it happened should let you know how great he really is. Truth bomb. There were a few other organizations prior to that that were very involved in 9/11 Truth. One of them was, at the time, 911truth.org, New York 9/11 Truth. And that's where myself, Dylan, and Corey initially would go down and actually screen loose change in the middle of New York City at some of these events, where a core group that included Truth Bomb, Luke Radowski, who would later create We Are Change, that again, Truth Bomb would do some of the most important work on
I hope
9/11.
you know you're only getting 1 point for each of
That's
these.
fine.
truth
We'll
bombs.
take
I
one.
love it though. I love
Yeah.
it though. But I just want to tell you that. Yeah, go on, keep going.
Well, I'm just saying that Luke Rudkowski, among others, his work on 9/11 is featured in my film, Fabled Enemies, where you had Joe Biden asked about his meeting with the head of the Pakistani ISI and the funding of the hijackers, which he admits to. And he goes, nobody knew they were funding the hijackers. Get a life. He also interviewed a man named Bo Dietl. Bo Dietl was kind of this cop that had a movie made about him. I believe the movie starred Stephen Baldwin. You might want to ask Baselit Analyzer about it. And Bo Dietl, very much in that New York police scene, he had a friend named John O'Neill. And he talked about John O'Neill and the fact that John O'Neill had left his post, I believe, at the FBI. This was an FBI agent that was part of the bin Laden squad. And he was worried about a terrorist attack, becomes the head of World Trade Center security. I think a lot of people say in the days, he took his post on the day of 9/11. Not exactly true. In fact, the Dark Overlord documents out there really start getting into Kroll and the intricacies of the privatized security and John O'Neill's role there. But O'Neill was killed on 9/11 after calling it out and taking that job, worried that they were a target and bin Laden was the prime suspect.
Wow. Well, there you go. You get a bonus point for that. There's so much there going on as well. You get the truth bomb point even. There's so much going on. It is really amazing how the truth movement formed around this one event mainly, and that coincided. And I don't think there was probably any coincidence. They knew the era of fifth generation warfare was upon us, and that's what we were heading towards. So I wouldn't be surprised if the 9/11 suited so many narratives or so many different objectives. Okay, one last question here. What policy allowed preemptive strikes post 9/11?
Policy.
This is a strange one that they've worded it like this.
Let me see. I mean, again, I don't think it's the NDAA. I don't think it's the Military Commissions Act. Let me try to think of what the.
I think it's a hard one because it's.
Let me think for just a second. What policy was preemptive strikes? Man, that's a tough one. I want to say something like Rumsfeld saying the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. You know what? I'm going to have to concede. That one's not coming to me.
I think this is a hard one. I don't think AI has done a good job. It said the Bush Doctrine, which I think is the basic idea of all like that was under the Bush, but it wasn't actually a policy in my official policy. It was just, I think, what it was called as a title. So, okay, right. One last final truth bomb, 9/11, to tie off the round succinctly. What would you like to say? You're the guy who has so much information on it. Try and get something that kind of like encompasses the whole thing, or something now that you think is really important.
Well, folks, I would say this, that along with everything that I've said right here, and I'm not claiming to be the only authority or that I get everything right, is that unfortunately 9/11 truth long ago was infiltrated with fantastical, nonsensical theories that not only distract from the international intelligence operation and the different groups that were involved, and we've named, the Israelis, the Pakistanis, the continuity of government, aka shadow government, and military programs going on here, and even the 9/11 Commission to whitewash and cover it up. But then you get into things like space lasers or no planes, and I've been around for the genesis of all of that. Now, look, again, I'm not saying I get things wrong, but I stick to what I can prove, and I try to have discernment. I always tell people, and we've been saying it for years, and there's a reason that this term was demonized during COVID 1984, was do your own research. And that means trying to get as much as of the base material, the actual PDFs, the actual hearings, the long form videos, and fact check. You're the fact checker, not NewsGuard, not X, not Community Notes, not Facebook. You're the fact checker. And look, there are always going to be pieces of evidence that you're not exactly sure because it's only been written about. You've got to take that outlet's word for it, that are contrarian to yet another piece of outlet. I always say look at both of them, report on both of them, and then use your discernment to speculate which one you believe more because of the other evidence that surrounds it. So that's really with everything. But with 9/11 in particular, because I'm going to leave on this one last thing, our entire foreign and domestic policy today, from the things that we talked about via the Patriot Act, via Homeland Security, into the drone technology and the airport surveillance systems that we all discussed, are based on the official narrative of 9/11 that has been completely and totally eviscerated.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. You're an amazing man. You're amazing man.